Welcome to the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Right now, we're going through the entire Bible to understand it as one big, cohesive story. We're covering one book each day, and this one's about 1 Samuel.
Hey, my friends, it's Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Today, we're looking at 1 Samuel, and I would like to begin by complaining. My complaint is this. The Bible is really good, and there's so much interesting stuff here, and I want to talk about all of it. The literature side, narrative, the history, the character arcs, all the connections with different stuff in the Bible. It's so good. I'm reading all of these books at least once before I make the episode, and this is already having such a profound effect on me. I just love it. I hope you're reading along as well and getting in as much Bible as you can as we do this, but I'm going to stick to my guns, one book per day, which means I need to get to talking about 1 Samuel. 1 Samuel is a two-part book. Think of 1 and 2 Samuel like a premium streaming TV season, a high drama, deep dive character, a lot of violence in that kind of show. And it has kind of a first half to the season and a second half. There's like a mid-season finale, and that is where the artificial after-the-fact break was inserted that creates a 1 and 2 Samuel, when originally this was probably just one singular document that had to be cut in two to accommodate scroll lengths or media styles and size or whatever way back in the day. So you might expect that break between 1 and 2 Samuel is just going to be clumsy, like just cut it at the halfway point, whatever. I think it's very well positioned at this high drama moment. At the end of 1 Samuel, the screen, it feels like it just wants to fade to black. Roll the credits as you get your hands on your head and you're like, no way did that just happen. Where does this go from here? And then you're all amped up to get into 2 Samuel and find out how this drama is going to unfold. Well, for one of these premium streaming TV shows to work, you got to have it set in a high stakes, high tension, high drama moment in history environment. And 1 Samuel absolutely nails it on that. This is set at the end of the era of the judges, the 300-ish year long nightmare where the people of Israel revert to some kind of primal savagery that is an embarrassment and a disgrace and takes us to places of darkness you and I might not even be able to invent. But yesterday, we see the little glimmer of hope book between Judges and 1 Samuel, and that's Ruth, where a Hebrew man from Bethlehem falls in love with and marries an outsider, a Gentile woman from Moab, age-old enemies of Israel. And through them, we discover that there's going to be this family line, this little branch off of the Abraham family tree that's going to produce King David. Things are starting to come into focus. Tell me more about where this is going. Is it okay for me to get my hopes up? And that's where the 12-episode season of 1 and 2 Samuel picks up. And what we get right off the bat is the introduction of the character for whom the book is named. There's this lady. Her name is Hannah. She can't have kids, and she's sad about that. And she prays to God and interacts with the priest, Eli, and she's assured you're going to have a kid, and she does have a kid. And the kid is Samuel, and she dedicates Samuel to the service of the Lord, so he's going to be nurtured and mentored by Eli, the priest. And then Hannah composes this beautiful song that is as rich theologically as anything in the entire Bible, that communicates as much about the grand redemptive plan and narrative through line as anything in the Bible. My heart exalts the Lord, my horn is exalted in the Lord, my mouth derides my enemies, because I rejoice in your salvation. There is none holy like the Lord, for there is none besides you. There is no rock like our God. And there's so much more, but these are only 10-ish minute episodes. Go read 1 Samuel 2 if you read nothing else from this book. We get to know Samuel a little bit, and what we discover is that his mentor's kids are idiots, and that God is effectively going to depose Eli's line as stewards of the priesthood. And Samuel is going to take their place as a priest, but also functionally as kind of like the last legitimate or good judge. So what we're seeing here is the introduction of this theme of deposition, of deposing failed leadership and putting new leadership in place on the human side, but that's contrasted with the tragedy that unfolds in 1 Samuel of God's chosen people kind of deposing their true king and replacing him with somebody who will ultimately turn out to be a failed human king. The rest of the opening chunk of 1 Samuel rounds out with the Philistines capturing the Ark of the Covenant, it's emblematic or maybe literally the place where God dwells among his people, and they try to take it back into Philistine territory, and it does not go well, and they end up just being like, fine, take it back, just take it back. Which rounds out a very interesting prologue on the note of, hey, the Israelite people, like, you had God leading you. He's powerful. He's in your midst. But nonetheless, they want a king like everybody else has. And part of what gets them there is yet another failed bit of leadership. Samuel gets old, and he makes the same mistake Eli does. He takes his kids, and he's like, oh, I'll just have you judge Israel then. But they're idiots too. And apparently they're so unjust and willing to receive bribes that they're like, forget it. We're done with this dumb system. The people of Israel, like, we just want a king. But we did the theocracy model. It isn't working. We don't like how it's going. Not a lot of personal responsibility or awareness there on their part. They demand a king. Samuel's like, okie dokie, but here's how kings are. And wow, do I resonate with the stuff that Samuel warns them about in terms of what kings are going to do, really what human governments are going to do in 1 Samuel 8. If you want to read something else interesting, go get that 1 Samuel 8, 10 through, 18. It's pretty prescient, pretty potent. Well, Saul is the guy who gets picked. He's huge. He's a big, monstrous, tall, gigantic man, and he's got a lot of promise. He's bashful, and it's not totally clear that he wants the job, but he gets roped into it, and at first seems like he's going to do all right. He does the stuff that God wants him to do. He defeats some enemies that didn't get defeated or resolved during the era of the conquest or the judges, and it looks like we're finally going to fix some of the stuff that was still wrong so that we can see these people be what they were supposed to be. But as meteoric as Saul's rise was, so is his decline. He gets something wrong that on the surface seems really ticky-tack. Like, seriously, why are people so bent out of shape about this? But ultimately, it comes out that, yeah, indeed, it was pride and selfishness that made him do the things that he did that were in opposition to what God had told him to do. And Samuel was like, okay, well, God has rejected you as king, Saul. And so, following the guidance of the Lord, Samuel, now a very old man, goes out and he finds the household of Jesse, and there he meets all of Jesse's very impressive older sons. And he gets told, like, nope, it's none of these. Those aren't the one. And famously, Samuel's like, you got anybody else? You have any other kids? And Jesse's like, I got my youngest one out there. And sure enough, that's who God picked. And probably the most famous verse in all of 1 Samuel happens in chapter 16 in the context of David getting picked. Samuel sees one of the brothers like, it's got to be that guy. But God says to Samuel, don't look on his appearance or on the height of his stature, because I have rejected him. For the Lord sees not as man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. And I think that verse is beloved because it's just a nice lesson in general. It rings true and pure, but also that theme plays out. And just as Abraham is praised as, he believed God and that was credited to him as righteousness. So David's big thing, like some of you have been through the Bible, you know this off the top of your head, like his superpower is he was a man after God's own heart. So you can see how that theme that was introduced in that verse I just read is advanced there. Well, famously, David defeats Goliath and he skyrockets to prominence. Saul gets really uncomfortable with that, becomes very insecure and threatened. David has a good friendship with Saul's son Jonathan, who's always got David's back at court, and it's a good thing, or Saul would have killed him because he's threatened by all that David's accomplished, and also David is now the Lord's anointed. God has rejected Saul as king. David is anointed to be the future king, but they got this weird friction where they're together, but David keeps treating Saul well and following his leadership. So it's a weird conundrum. Most of the rest of 1 Samuel has David on the run out in the desert, Saul trying to kill him with spears, and multiple times David has the opportunity to kill Saul, but he doesn't do it because he won't raise his hand against the Lord's anointed. At every turn, Saul demonstrates low character as he spirals into madness. Then at pretty much every turn, David demonstrates shrewdness and savvy and innocence. And in the end, Saul's bad leadership, Saul's bad decision-making catches up with him. He loses in battle to his lifelong enemy, the Philistines, and he falls on his own sword. And that's where the mid-season finale of 1 and 2 Samuel goes to credits. So we leave 1 Samuel wondering if David's going to be able to take hold of the throne. And if so, is he going to be any good as a king? Is it through him that some kind of redemption is going to happen? Or is this whole thing just going to spiral back into madness now that this one king is gone? And we will have found ourselves making no progress toward redemption whatsoever. We're going to find out more about that next time around in 2 Samuel. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.
This podcast is supported by many of you at patreon.com/the TMBH podcast. We're grateful because it supports our family.